thought about that it's the small wins that eventually will give you the big deal. Orion and I, we just finished our event in Stockholm, Sweden. And every October, we have our international event. And last year, we came in a little bit early. So when all the preparations were done on Thursday evening, we decided to have a little romantic evening. Now, the next day, we said to each other, at least we're doing our best to get a baby. A few weeks later, I was sitting on the plane going to the Mastermind event. And immediately when I sat on that plane, I had this great feeling of expectation. I felt that there was something that was about to happen. And during the last day of the event, I said to Orion, you know what? I think that we should buy a pregnancy test. So after a lovely dinner together with the faculty, we went up to our suite, we took the test, and it came out with a clear cross. Now, for those of you that know our story, you know that this wasn't the first time we actually got a clear cross on a pregnancy test, because I had been pregnant many times in the past. In fact, I actually had 13 miscarriages. And when you've had all those failures, a lot of people would say to themselves, well, this is probably also going to turn out to be a failure. But you know what? Instead, we decided to celebrate. I said to Orion, this is the one, we nailed it, I know it. And I'm so happy to tell you that little Gabriel is with us here this weekend. So small wins is the thing that will get you to the big deal. I remember sitting together with one of our leaders, Gudrun, from Iceland, in Marrakesh, Morocco, on a promotional trip. The sun was shining and it was hot outside, and some of our company friends were about to start a pool party right next to us. And then she leant over to me and she said, Hilde, do you know, I'm so proud of my team. Did you know that I actually have 20 people that qualified for this promotional trip? And as she said that, my memory got triggered, because I remember very well a few years back when we were at the Dream Resort on another promotional trip in Cancun, Mexico. And one of the things that Gudrun is known for is her fighting spirit. But during that particular trip, I remember her sadness, the sadness in her eyes. She didn't have that normal glow about her that she normally has. And back then, it wasn't so difficult, actually, to qualify for promotional trips. You only needed to have like $30,000 to $40,000 in volume in a month. And she's working the business together with her husband. They're doing it 50-50. And they couldn't afford to bring him along on the trip because they had only qualified for one spot. So she came on her own. Now, during that trip, she said to me that if she didn't qualify for the trip, they probably would have decided to quit. And 1 year later, she told me that the reason they decided to stay in the business was because of one insignificant, silly little story that I told during one of the educations. Of course, in combination with the trip in general and also the other speakers. And the story I told was a story about an old farmer named Jacob and his mule named Caesar. Now, one day, Caesar were out walking, and he fell into an abandoned well. That was about 50 feet deep. Now, the well was narrow, and Caesar was cramped at the bottom. And because he hadn't made any sound or moved after the fall, Jacob thought that his old friend was probably dead. So he called his friends, and even though he really loved the old animal, he didn't really see any way he could rescue old Caesar. So he called a few friends, and they decided to shovel some dirt up in the well to bury him. Now, when the first shovel of dirt hit Caesar's back, he woke up because he was knocked out from the fall. When the next shovel of dirt hit his back, he suddenly realized what was going on, and he didn't want to be buried, so he shook the dirt off, stepped on it, and stepped out of it. Every time he felt the dirt hitting his back, he shook and stepped. And 2 hours later, Jacob and his friends were stunned to see his ears appear on the top of the well and Caesar walk into freedom. Now, the moral of that story was that there are two kinds of people. The first kind are the ones that will let themselves be buried. When they hit obstacles, that will be the total death. The other kind will use those obstacles, those challenges, to step on it and using as a stepping stone to get to the next level. Now, for me to tell that story in my speech was just like a little small win in my talk, you know. Some people laughed, others applauded. For Gudrun, she related with the mule. So she decided to use it as a stepping stone and overcome their obstacles. Now, $30,000 to $40,000 in volume a month. They weren't really the biggest leaders in our business. But you know, today, when they have 40 people qualified for our next promotional trip to Dubai, and they're producing close to $1 million a month in volume, I would say that small win became a very big deal. Kristen, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, known her for a long time. It probably must have been the 58th attempt. In fact, I haven't really pursued to sponsor her into the business. We've been dear friends for a long time, and I don't remember how it all started, how we started to talk about it, but suddenly I figured out that the timing was right for her, and she maybe should come on board and join our business. Now, the truth was that she is a veteran in the profession. She's been a CEO of another direct selling company for years in the past. In the past, she's also been a professional networker for a long time. She has really high credentials, and she knows more about the profession than most people. Suddenly, the timing was right. She said yes. Again, to book a meeting for the 58th time, or to meet someone for lunch or dinner for the 287th time is just really a small win, right? But when she today, after 6 months in the business, is a diamond in our company, I would say that that small win became a very big deal. Now, every time I'm in a coaching, people are usually asking me, so how can I be the big deal? Or in reality, that's not exactly the words they're using, but that's kind of underlaying it all. That's what they're wondering. Because everyone wants to sponsor the superstar. Everyone wants to break through. But in reality, the key is that for you to get the big deal, it's small wins compounded over time. It's 3.5% growth, monthly growth, that eventually will lead to 50% annual growth. It's 6.5% monthly growth that eventually will lead you to 100% growth annually. Now, if you're here in this room today and let's say you have 100 customers in your team. Now, to grow with 100%, going from 100 to 200, or thinking about it in a different way, growing 6.5% now in November and increasing your total customer base with 7 customers don't necessarily seem that significant. However, if you grow 6.5% monthly, 100% annually for 10 years, you will have 102,400 customers. Suddenly, that insignificant thing became a very big deal. Now, some of you are thinking to yourself, well, you know, that's really not realistic, you know, to grow 100% a year annually. Well, actually, for some people it is. There are a lot of people that actually do, but let's take it down a level. Let's focus on 50% growth. Well, to grow from 100 to 150 don't necessarily seem that significant, but again, 10 years from now, you will have 8,649 customers in your team. And in most companies, that would mean financial freedom. Give it a hand. So if you really want the big deal, let me give you a few small win recipes. Like I said, we just finished our annual event. And one of the things I see in our company, and you maybe can relate to it, is that every year when we have our international event, people are working like crazy to get the big titles, to qualify for the promotional trip. So suddenly, they're looking towards the deadline and they are running as fast as they can. Now, they are a little bit different in different companies. I don't know how many events, seminars you have during a year, but in most companies, you have between, I would say, 3 to 6 big events. So what if you decided to use every event as a deadline? What if you decided to work as hard towards all the regional events, towards all the local events, as you do for the international event? What if you decided to have 52 small win weekly goals? What if you decided to have 12 small win monthly goals? What would that eventually do for your business? One of the big differences I see between the professional networker and the amateur networker is that the professionals always are working towards a deadline. And the reality is that over time, when you implement working towards a deadline, the difference in result can usually be multiplied with a 10. So instead of reaching 1,000 customers, you will be at 10,000. Instead of being at 10,000, you will be at 100,000. Instead of being at 100,000, you would be at 1 million. So deadline matters. When it comes to small wins, the deadline matters. I remember in July, Orion and I were having dinner with a dear friend of ours named Tim Story. He's an amazing author, a tremendous speaker. He's really, really an interesting guy to spend time with. And as we were, or actually one of his favorite quotes, this is one of his absolute favorite quotes, is that he said, "You never know who you're talking to." So during this particular dinner, Orion turns to Tim and he asks Tim, "So Tim, do you remember the first time we met? Back in 1995 in Bergen, Norway." Now, of course, Tim didn't remember that. That was so long back. And Orion was back then just a flimsy 19-year-old that was just super hungry and was asking a lot of questions to all the different speakers that was speaking at a particular conference. Now, it's a little interesting to think about. Even though Tim didn't remember, today we're friends and we are bringing him business. You never know who you're talking to. It could be the person that you're meeting on the way back home on the airplane. Maybe that's the person that is going to be a major player in your business. Maybe it's the 20-year-old that showed up for a meeting last week that is going to be your next global Starfleet commander or whatever title you have in your company. You never know. I remember at my first Mastermind event, I think it was in 2002 or 2001, I was standing in the breakfast line and I was going to order an omelet. And next to me were standing an older fellow. And of course, we didn't have anything better to do, so we started to talk. So during our conversation, just after talking with him for a few minutes, I realized that I'm standing with a veteran in our profession. He had over hundreds of thousands of customers in his team. He was earning over $1 million a year. And honestly, by his looks, how he dressed, I wouldn't spot that. And that's one thing that you should really think about, because your behavior matters. You never know. Your behavior matters when you're at home, when you're in church, when you're at the mall, when you're at work, when you're talking with your team, when you're talking about your team, or when you're meeting potential new people. You never know. If you'd met me at day 33 in the beginning of my journey in this profession, you would never spot me standing on this podium today. Back then, I had 63 no's in a row. And this particular evening, day 33, I got 3 phone calls in a row from the people that I believed the most in, that had said yes, and they were canceling their contract. I was not really happy about my start, I can assure you that. So I really had to grow. I seriously had to grow. I wasn't the biggest talent starting out in this profession. Actually, at one point, one person in my upline, there was a lot of people that told me to quit, but this was the worst kind, or this was the worst one. A person in my upline, after being involved for about a year, he actually asked me to sit down with him, and he said, "Have you considered to quit?" I don't know what that means. So of course, being a red personality, I thought of that as a challenge, and I really wanted him to eat his words, right? So it made me work harder. And today, when Orion and I have a commission check that most people would cry for, and I know it's unpolitical correct to talk numbers or net worth and so, but a net worth of $50 million, I would say that's a little bit of a big deal. You never know. It might be the person that are sitting next to you, that are in your team, that you haven't really seen the potential in yet, that is going to be your next president in your company, or whatever titles you have. It might be the shy gal that are always attending the different meetings, but you don't really see her do the business yet. It might be the guy that you haven't gotten the chance to sit down with, to schedule meetings with, to teach. You never know. That's why it's so important to remember that how you treat people matters. How you treat people matters. Talking about scheduling meetings, we're going to have 3 incredible days. But for you to really get the maximum out of this weekend, you need to know, what are you going to do during the upcoming 30 days? How are you going to fill your calendar? How many meetings are you going to have? Because the truth is that there's a lot of people that are attending conferences like this, and they become really motivated, but they don't go out and use what they've just learned. So the real value is if you use these 3 days to schedule a lot of meetings in your business, and to go out and use this event as a stepping stone to really break through a lot of records during the upcoming 30 days. Are you ready for that? I asked, are you ready for that? It's now been a little over 100 days since I gave birth to our little son. And I have to say that I had no idea how much joy and happiness and pleasure, but also challenge it has been to get this little human being into our life. And one of the things, like there's been a lot of different episodes happening, but one episode that I remember very, very well was in August. It was a Sunday morning in August. And we were, well, actually it all started on this Saturday evening because Gabriel had been crying a lot. He has had some stomach pain during evening. So this Saturday he was crying a lot. And eventually when he went to sleep, it was obvious that he still had a swollen stomach. So on the Sunday morning, I was sitting in the so-called nursing chair in our bedroom. Orion was sitting on a stool in front of me. I had Gabriel in my lap. And we were looking down at our little miracle, wondering, how much will he cry today? Will he get something out in his diapers? Suddenly, out of nowhere, Gabriel suddenly lets out this very long, loud fart. Now, this was very surprising, and I looked up at Orion, and suddenly he has this happy look on his face, like very happy eyes. And I get this emotional wave just shoveling over me, and I'm in a weak moment. I just look up at my husband and I say, honey, I think I have to cry a little bit. And honestly, it's the first time in my life that I've ever cried because I cried of joy because someone pooed in my lap. So one of the things, and this is the third key when it comes to small win, your attitude matters. When you have a child, when you have a newborn, when you have a teenager, your attitude matters. Suddenly you realize that you can't really control all the different things. When you're a teenager, aren't really using your advices, doing the total opposite, your attitude matters. One of the best books, and also the first book I ever read about personal development, was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's a great book, right? And in that book, he writes, thoughts are things. And this is a proven fact. But one of the things that I find a little fascinating is that over the last years, they've been doing a lot of research around how power thoughts are actually affecting our results. Like, for instance, at one point, they did a research at the University of Cologne in Germany, where they studied, they proved that a person that were thinking of themselves as powerful would sink 44% more golf puts that from 150 centimeters of range than their peers. Another study actually proved that a person that was looking at power words, like for instance the word influence, would actually finish their puzzle 22% faster than a person that were looking at so-called low power words. So power words are affecting our results. Now, how do we use this in our business? Well, it means that when you're on your way to a presentation, when you're having a meeting, if you think of yourself as powerful, if you think about the results that you're about to create, that's going to affect your result. So deadlines matters, people matters, but also your attitude matters. But we could also twist it around, and we could say that it's your attitude with people over time that really makes the big difference. In this room today, I have one of our leaders, Kim. And when I first met Kim the first time, I have to say that I was a little bit skeptical. You know, he was wearing leather pants, he had this funny looking hair. Actually, I call him my sissy since we have the same haircut, you know. And he also smelled a little funny. The first impression wasn't really the best thing, but after getting to know Kim, after really talking with him, after understanding the depth of his personality, understanding his service-minded heart, I really got to see that we have a very potential leader here. Now, on honestly, over the years, the people I've been working with, they haven't necessarily always had the perfect degree or the most top-notch job. They've just been, like me, extremely hungry for results, an eagerness to learn, and a willingness to work hard. And it wasn't actually before 8 years after I first met Kim that I got to know that his brother was one of the top-notch bankers in New York. You never know. Today, Kim is a brilliant leader. He's such a great leader in our profession, and he's definitely a history maker in our company. So, 5 years, thousands of attempts, one more romantic evening was all it took to make a perfect son. And the key is, during the next 30 days, it's one more month. You have one more opportunity to go all out. You have one more opportunity to design your life. You have one more opportunity to get your business into momentum. And when you really do understand that small wins are the key for you to get the big deal, that is when you will get the result. It's time. It's time. It's time for you to win big. Please welcome my dear husband, Orion Sæle.